Imagine being so beautiful that it became your curse, a curse that caught the eye of Rome's most dangerous man. This isn't the tale of a general or a senator, it's the story of a boy reshaped into an empress, paraded before the empire as a living ghost. His name was Lucius Marcellus, and his life reveals just how far absolute power could twist love into cruelty. Stay with me, because his end was as shocking as his beginning. Section 1. In the shadowed corridors of imperial history, where marble and blood often mingled, few tales embody the fragility of identity under absolute rule as fully as that of Lucius Marcellus, a youth whose beauty and fate collided with the obsessions of Rome's most volatile emperor. The year was 66 AD. The empire sprawled in glittering arrogance from the wilds of Britannia to the deserts of Judea. To the citizens of Rome, the Emperor Aelius Domitianus, a man worshipped as near divine, was both spectacle and terror. He had rebuilt the city with fountains, theaters, and gilded arches, but beneath his reign, the Tiber itself seemed to carry whispers of corruption and madness. Rome still bore the charred wounds of a great fire. Survivors muttered that Aelius himself had ordered the flames to clear ground for his sprawling palace, the Domus Solaris, a golden labyrinth where halls gleamed with polished marble and ceilings sparkled with gems. But amidst that blinding luxury, cruelty festered. It was here that Lucius, a freed youth of extraordinary grace, found himself entangled in the emperor's gaze. He was not ambitious. He had no family name to carve into history, no senate seat awaiting him. Instead, he possessed something far more dangerous, a face so fine-boned and luminous that even jaded courtiers paused when he passed. His dark eyes held a quiet intelligence, his movements the effortless poise of someone born to tread carefully in dangerous places. At first, he was nothing more than another servant in the vast machinery of the palace. He polished bronze lamps, fetched wine, and blended into the endless tide of attendants. But destiny, in Rome, often wore the mask of accident. Aelius had been mourning. His second wife, Claudia Sabina, had died months earlier under circumstances that courtiers whispered about in shadows. Some claimed the emperor had struck her during a quarrel. Others swore she perished giving birth. Whatever the truth, her absence left Aelius unmoored, his grief bleeding into obsession. One evening, during a banquet drowning in music and roasted meats, his gaze fell upon Lucius. Conversation froze. The boy's profile, caught in lamplight, mirrored Claudia's with unsettling precision. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the chamber as Aelius rose, his wine spilling across mosaics. "By the gods!" the emperor whispered, his eyes wide. "She lives again." The courtiers exchanged nervous glances. Lucius, startled, bowed deeply, hoping to vanish into anonymity. But fate had already closed its iron hand around him. Section 2. That night marked the end of Lucius' fragile anonymity. Summoned to the emperor's private chambers, he stood trembling beneath frescoes of gods and monsters. Torches hissed in the braziers, their flames casting restless shadows across Aelius Domitianus' face. The emperor studied him with the hunger of a man desperate to resurrect what he had lost. He circled Lucius slowly, like a painter scrutinizing his canvas. "Your cheekbones," Aelius murmured, reaching out but not quite touching. "The very curve of her lips. Even the lashes. How cruel the fates, to take her from me and yet mock me with her ghost in your flesh." Lucius swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the marble floor. "Caesar, I am but a servant." "Not any more." The emperor's tone was final. "From this moment you belong to me." It was not the trembling declaration of a lover, nor the benevolent claim of a patron. It was the decree of a man for whom ownership was as natural as breathing. Aelius had seized provinces with the same offhand authority. Now, he seized a life. The following days blurred into a nightmare. Lucius was stripped of his duties, taken into the inner wing of the palace, and surrounded by attendants who measured him, touched his skin with oils, draped silks across his frame. He resisted at first, stammering protests, pleading for release, but the palace walls had no ears for mercy. Whispers spread among the servants, the emperor intended something extraordinary. Some pitied the boy, Others smirked at his impending transformation. Rome, after all, had long grown accustomed to imperial caprice. Then came the physician's visit. Cloaked in white, flanked by assistants bearing bronze instruments, he entered Lucius' chamber with a solemn expression. Lucius' blood turned to ice. He had heard rumors, snatches of words like alteration, perfection, rebirth. No! Lucius cried as soldiers restrained him. I am a man, I am not her! The physician did not answer. The instruments gleamed under lamplight, cold and merciless. The procedure was performed in the gilded silence of the palace infirmary. Marble walls muffled screams, and attendants kept their eyes lowered. By dawn, Lucius' body had been irrevocably altered, reshaped to fit the emperor's grief-twisted vision. When he awoke, fevered and shaking, he barely recognized himself. The attendants spoke in gentle tones, addressing him not as Lucius but as Sabina, the Empress reborn. In the days that followed, Aelius visited often. He knelt by the bed, stroking the youth's hair with a tenderness that was almost more terrifying than cruelty. Do you see? The emperor whispered. Death is no match for my will. She lives again, and Rome shall witness it. Lucius, Sabina now, in the emperor's eyes, turned away, tears burning his face. He was no longer a servant, nor even a man. He had been transformed into a monument of grief, a grotesque theater prop in the emperor's endless play against mortality. Section 3. The announcement struck Rome like a thunderbolt. The emperor would remarry. Not to some foreign princess or noble-born maiden, but to Sabina, a figure cloaked in mystery. Rumors whispered through the forum like wildfire. Some claimed she was a noblewoman of secret bloodline, others insisted she was a goddess incarnate. Only those within the palace walls knew the truth. Sabina was no bride at all, but Lucius Marcellus, reshaped by the emperor's will. The wedding day arrived with pageantry that glittered over the horror beneath. Garlands of laurel and roses hung from marble arches. Musicians played lyres and flutes, their melodies drowned by the roar of thousands summoned to witness the spectacle. Senators in their white togas lined the steps, their faces pale masks of forced reverence. Lucius, now draped in Claudia's own silks, her jewels heavy around his neck, stood at the center of it all, every movement rehearsed by the emperor's attendants. His reflection in polished bronze showed not himself, but the shadow of the dead empress. His lips trembled, though he forced them into stillness. Aelius strode forward, cloaked in purple, the golden laurel crown blazing on his head. His voice carried across the forum. Rome! Behold the will of your emperor! Death has not triumphed over me. My beloved Sabina walks again at my side. The crowd erupted, though not with joy. Some cheered out of fear, others whispered prayers against such blasphemy. Still others, especially the soldiers, watched with the dull resignation of men long accustomed to imperial madness. The priest of Jupiter raised trembling hands. Do you, Aelius Domitianus, take this woman? Say it, the emperor hissed, eyes burning into Lucius. Lucius' throat tightened. His heart hammered so loudly he could hear nothing else. I do, he whispered, his voice thin as smoke. Louder! I do! The words echoed, and with them, something in Lucius shattered. The vow was not love but surrender, carved into the fabric of his being. The priest completed the ritual, and Aelius pressed a kiss to Lucius' lips, sealing the grotesque union before gods and men. The feast that followed was a grotesque parody of joy. Dancers swirled, goblets overflowed, and poets recited verses comparing Sabina's rebirth to Venus rising from the sea. At the imperial table, Lucius sat rigid beside Aelius, his face painted with careful cosmetics, his body draped in silks that weighed like chains. Every toast, every cheer, was a dagger. Senator Flavius, drunk and bitter, muttered to his neighbor, Rome once conquered nations. Now it marries phantoms. Lucius heard. The words cut deeper than the physician's knife. Later that night, when the banquet hall had emptied and only the echoes of laughter remained, Aelius pulled Lucius close, whispering as if to Claudia herself. You will never leave me again. Lucius closed his eyes. He had become both prisoner and ghost, bound to play the role of a woman long dead, while his own name, his own life, slipped further into silence. Section 4. The days after the wedding bled into one another, each marked by spectacle and suffocating performance. Lucius was no longer Lucius. The attendants called him Augusta Sabina. Courtiers bowed as he entered chambers. Even hardened soldiers addressed him with the reverence reserved for an empress. Yet behind their bows and honeyed words, Lucius could see their eyes, mocking, pitying, or horrified. Every public appearance became a theater of lies. He was paraded in a gilded carriage, veiled in purple silk, jewels glittering at his wrists and throat. Rome's citizens lined the streets to gape at the resurrected Empress. Some gasped in awe, others spat curses under their breath. Children pointed, whispering to their mothers, "She moves like a man." Inside the carriage, Lucius sat stiff and silent, his hands knotted in his lap. Aelius sat beside him, smiling broadly, waving to the crowd, his voice booming. "See! The gods have favored me. My Claudia walks again. Rome is eternal!" Lucius said nothing. His silence was both shield and wound. At banquets he was forced to recline beside the emperor, fed figs and grapes by trembling servants. He learned to keep his face serene, to sip wine without flinching, to laugh softly when Aelius demanded it. Any slip, a glance too sharp, a word too hesitant, provoked the emperor's fury. Once, when Lucius accidentally addressed Aelius as Lord instead of husband, the hall froze. Aelius' smile vanished. He gripped Lucius' wrist hard enough to bruise and hissed, "You are Sabina. Nothing else. Do not forget." That night, in the privacy of the bedchamber, the emperor wept. He lay against Lucius' shoulder, whispering Claudia's name over and over, as if by sheer repetition he could make the illusion real. His tears dampened the silk sheets, and Lucius lay motionless, staring into the shadows. The palace itself became a prison of mirrors. Courtiers brought him perfumes once worn by Claudia. Dancers mimicked her favorite steps, urging Lucius to copy them. Tutors rehearsed her manner of speech with him, correcting every syllable until his voice echoed hers. He was no longer merely playing a role, he was being erased. Yet sometimes, when alone, Lucius dared to whisper his true name into the empty air. Lucius Marcellus. The syllables felt strange, almost foreign, as if they belonged to another life. He clung to them like a secret prayer. One evening, as he was escorted through the peristyle gardens, a young palace guard dared to speak. His name was Marcus, a veteran's son with scars along his jaw. He glanced around to ensure no one listened, then murmured under his breath, "You were not always Sabina, were you?" Lucius froze. His heart lurched into his throat. I don't know what you mean," he stammered. Marcus' eyes softened with pity. "I do. I see you. Hold on to yourself, whatever they call you." Before Lucius could respond, another guard barked for silence. But the words lingered like a spark in darkness. Someone still saw him. Still, the emperor's obsession deepened. Aelius commissioned statues of Lucius in Claudia's likeness, placed in temples and courtyards. Priests were ordered to offer sacrifices to the restored Empress. Rome bent beneath the emperor's delusion, and Lucius was forced to bend with it. Each day, he felt the distance growing between the person he had been and the ghost he was forced to become. Section 5. The tours began in early spring, when the emperor declared that the provinces must see the reborn Empress. Rome's streets glittered with departure processions, trumpets blaring, banners unfurling, legions in polished armor marching ahead of gilded carriages. At the center of it all sat Aelius, radiant with triumph, and beside him, Lucius, veiled and silent. Their first destination was Greece. To the Greek aristocrats, the emperor's appearance was both spectacle and burden, but the sight of Lucius provoked hushed disbelief. Draped in flowing robes of pale blue, jewels cascading down his chest, he moved with forced elegance, every gesture rehearsed. Courtiers bowed, calling him Sabina Augusta, yet their eyes betrayed them. Some stared too long, recognizing the delicate strength in his jawline, the flicker of despair in his gaze. Others looked away quickly, unwilling to acknowledge the grotesque charade. During a banquet in Corinth, a Greek noble leaned close to his neighbor and whispered, loud enough for Lucius to hear, "Is it love, or lunacy, when an emperor weds his own illusion?" Lucius kept his eyes on the floor, hands trembling in his lap. Aelius, however, laughed boisterously, as though the words were a compliment. He kissed Lucius' cheek before all, proclaiming, "My love transcends death itself. Can your philosophers boast such power?" The hall roared with forced applause. Lucius felt the heat of humiliation crawl up his neck, but he dared not move. The tours stretched for months. City after city, temple after temple, he was displayed like a sacred relic. In Athens, he was paraded before the Parthenon, offerings laid at his feet as though he were a goddess. In Delphi, priests chanted praises to Sabina returned, while Aelius looked on, eyes glistening with a lover's madness. Lucius' existence became an endless performance. He woke each morning to attendants painting his face, dressing him in silks that smelled of lavender and rose. He spoke little, for his voice betrayed him, and when he did, it was carefully measured, soft as a sigh. His body moved by memory, every gesture choreographed into femininity. But beneath the silks, beneath the powdered cheeks, Lucius withered. Nights were the worst. Alone in foreign chambers, he would sit before polished bronze mirrors and stare at the reflection forced upon him. He touched his face, his neck, the place where his manhood had been stolen, and felt only emptiness. Once, in a rare moment of privacy on the Aegean coast, Marcus, the same guard who had once whispered comfort, found him walking alone. The sea wind tangled Lucius' veil, and for a moment, his face was bare. "You look like yourself," Marcus said quietly. Lucius turned sharply. "Myself? Not the Empress. Not the lie. Just you." For a heartbeat, Lucius felt something stir, a memory of laughter, of freedom. But it died quickly, smothered by the weight of what he had become. "I am no one," he whispered, voice raw. "The Emperor has seen to that." Marcus reached out as if to touch his arm, then stopped, fear flashing in his eyes. "You are someone. Even if you're the only one who remembers it." Before Lucius could respond, attendants called him back. The mask had to be worn again. He left the shore, but Marcus' words lingered like salt on his lips. And so the tour continued, a prison without walls, where applause and incense masked chains invisible yet unbreakable. Each city bowed, each crowd cheered, and with each performance, Lucius felt his true self receding further, like a fading echo swallowed by the roar of empire. Section 6. When at last the tour ended, Rome awaited them with fanfare and unease. Trumpets echoed across the forum as Aelius paraded his Empress through the streets, the citizens forced once more to applaud what many secretly considered blasphemy. Statues of Claudia Sabina had been hastily remodeled to resemble Lucius, their stone faces eerily familiar yet subtly wrong. Within the Domus Solaris, the emperor's obsession deepened into ritual. Every evening, Aelius demanded that Lucius recount memories he never lived, what Claudia had whispered during their walks, how she had smiled when the gladiators fought, the lullabies she had sung to herself at dawn. "But Lucius faltered once, voice breaking. "I do not remember these things. I was not." The emperor's hand struck the table, goblets spilling wine like blood across marble. His face flushed crimson. "You were!" Aelius roared. "She lives in you. Do not deny me!" Terror sealed Lucius' lips. From then on, he spoke only what was demanded, parroting fragments fed to him by attendants. He became a vessel for Claudia's ghost, emptied of himself. The palace staff navigated the charade with trembling obedience. Slaves bowed and addressed him as Augusta. Courtiers offered compliments with voices tight from repression. Yet in the corridors, whispers spread like smoke: the emperor weds a phantom. Rome is cursed. At times, Aelius displayed tenderness that chilled more than his rages. He draped Lucius in Claudia's favorite cloak, its fabric soft as a lover's touch. He pressed his lips to Lucius' brow, murmuring, "At last, you are mine again." His eyes shone with the feverish devotion of a man who had blurred grief into madness. But cracks began to show. Senators muttered privately that the empire was bleeding, provincial unrest simmered, legions grumbled over pay, and grain shortages sparked riots in the Subura. Yet the emperor seemed blind, lost in his private theater of resurrection. One night, during a banquet heavy with wine and roasted boar, Senator Lepidus dared to raise the issue of rebellion in Gaul. "Caesar," he began carefully, "the legions whisper of mutiny. They—" Aelius silenced him with a laugh, flinging a fig across the table. "Let them whisper. So long as my Sabina sits beside me, Rome is unshaken." He seized Lucius' hand, raising it high before the assembly. The hall applauded weakly, but beneath the clamor lay dread. Rome's emperor had traded reason for obsession, and the empire itself trembled in the balance. That night, as torches guttered in the corridors, Marcus approached Lucius in secret once more. "They will destroy him soon," the guard murmured. "And when they do, they may destroy you as well." Lucius turned hollow eyes toward him. "Then let them. What life remains to me?" Marcus hesitated, jaw clenched. "Life is still yours, if you can keep it hidden. Remember your name. Remember who you are, even if only in silence." Lucius wanted to believe him. Yet when dawn came and the emperor adorned him in jewels, calling him, "My eternal Sabina," he felt himself vanish a little more, swallowed by the illusion Rome was forced to endure. The empire strained at its seams, but within the palace, Aelius' madness held sway, and Lucius, trapped in silks and shadows, was both the centerpiece and the prisoner of a dream that was never his. Section 7. The year that followed turned from spectacle to storm. Rome's grandeur seemed hollow, its streets buzzing with unease. Grain shipments from Egypt faltered, soldiers grumbled in taverns, and provincial governors sent letters laced with veiled defiance. Yet within the golden halls of the Domus Solaris, Aelius remained enthralled with his Empress, blind to the empire's crumbling foundations. Lucius endured the charade, though each day stripped away more of himself. He was forced to sit at council meetings, silent and veiled, as if the presence of the resurrected Claudia lent divine favor to imperial decrees. When Aelius demanded his opinion, Lucius repeated the carefully fed lines, though senators shifted uneasily, knowing the voice belonged not to an empress, but to a mutilated boy. Still, cracks appeared in the illusion. At a gladiatorial spectacle, a drunk citizen shouted across the arena, "Is she woman or shade? Or boy in a gown?" The crowd fell into stunned silence. Aelius leapt to his feet, his voice thundering, "She is Rome's eternal Sabina!" The guards seized the heckler, dragging him away as the emperor beamed, oblivious to the unease spreading through the amphitheater. That night, Lucius lay awake, heart pounding. He knew the people saw him, not as Sabina, not as Empress, but as a cruel mockery. And yet to defy the role was impossible. One evening, when the palace was hushed with shadows, Marcus again sought him out. He spoke quickly, his voice low. "The legions in Hispania have declared for General Varro. Soon others will follow. Aelius will fall." Lucius stared, a strange mixture of dread and relief flooding him. "And me?" Marcus hesitated. "They will not let you go free. You are too valuable a symbol. Whoever claims you next will wield you as a trophy." Lucius' stomach churned. He had been turned into an object, a prize passed hand to hand. Freedom, once a simple condition of breath, now felt like a fantasy. Days later, a riot broke out in the Forum. Citizens hurled stones at imperial statues, shouting curses against the emperor and his ghost bride. Fires licked at the edges of the market before soldiers restored order. From the palace balcony, Aelius stood clutching Lucius' hand, presenting him as though his presence alone could quell the mob. "Behold your Augusta!" he shouted, his voice ringing through the night. "Rome lives because she lives!" The crowd's response was chilling, not cheers, but a low murmur of anger, a tide threatening to break. That night, in the privacy of his chamber, Aelius collapsed into Lucius' arms, weeping. They do not understand. But you are mine! You will always be mine! Lucius held him mechanically, eyes distant. For the first time, he allowed himself a dangerous thought. Perhaps Aelius' fall would be his only chance at reclaiming what remained of his humanity. The empire trembled. The emperor's grip weakened. And Lucius, once a boy, now a phantom empress, waited in silence as the world shifted toward collapse. Section 8. The Fall. The collapse came with startling swiftness. In the summer of 68 AD, the Praetorian Guard, once the emperor's shield, turned their loyalty elsewhere. Senators declared him a tyrant. Across the provinces, legions raised banners against him. Rome itself braced for the storm. Within the Domus Solaris, chaos reigned. Courtiers fled with treasures clutched in their arms, servants vanished into the night, and whispers of betrayal echoed through the marble halls. Aelius raged, pacing like a caged beast. They will not dare touch me! He spat, gripping Lucius' hand so tightly it hurt. As long as Sabina stands at my side, the gods themselves are with me. But Lucius saw the truth in the emperor's trembling eyes. Fear had replaced certainty. The escape was desperate. Under moonlight, Aelius, Lucius, and a handful of loyalists fled through hidden passages, leaving the palace that had been both prison and stage. They rode into the countryside, the emperor still wrapped in purple, Lucius still draped in silks that now felt grotesque against the dirt and sweat of flight. For days they wandered. Aelius spoke wildly of raising new armies, of returning in triumph. Yet every rider who approached brought only darker news. The Senate had condemned him, the provinces had deserted him, Rome awaited his death. At last, cornered in a villa outside the city, Aelius understood the inevitable. They will drag me naked through the forum, he muttered, face pale, hands shaking. They will strip me of everything. No, I will not give them that pleasure. He turned to Lucius, eyes blazing with desperate tenderness. If you truly are Sabina, you will die with me. Lucius froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He was not Sabina. He had never been Sabina. Yet here, at the end, the emperor demanded the illusion remain unbroken. Moments later, Aelius fell on his own blade, guided by his secretary's hand. The self-proclaimed god-emperor died with a whimper, not a roar. Lucius stood trembling, the silks clinging to him like shrouds. For the first time, the chain that bound him loosened. Yet freedom was fleeting. Soldiers soon arrived, claiming him as spoils of conquest. Passed from one ruler to another, he became a living relic of the fallen tyrant's madness. The final cruelty came under Vitellianus, a coarse man who relished spectacle. He planned to parade Lucius in the arena, forced to reenact the abduction of a goddess, his humiliation serving as entertainment for the Roman mob. When Lucius learned of this, something hardened within him. Years of silence, of being erased, had taught him one truth: the only choice left to him was the manner of his end. On the eve of the spectacle, he stole away into the shadows. With trembling hands he took his own life, choosing death over degradation. Epilogue. The people of Rome barely noticed when Lucius Marcellus passed. To many, he was just another strange footnote in the annals of imperial excess. Yet his story lingers like a ghost, an echo of how absolute power can strip away identity, twist grief into cruelty, and transform a human being into a stage prop for a tyrant's delusion. In his final act, Lucius reclaimed what the emperor had stolen, the right to decide his fate. It was a bitter victory, but a victory nonetheless. And though Rome would forget his name, history remembers the shadow of his suffering, a reminder that beneath the grandeur of empires lie countless broken lives, silenced but not erased.